When it comes to eco-driving and saving fuel, the mantra ease, don't squeeze will save you a lot of money. So this video, we're going to look at the topic of eco-driving. We're going to touch on hypermiling. We're going to look at some misunderstandings and myths out there about economical driving. This video draws from my 30 years driving experience, thousands of comments that we've had on our forums, on our website, and also on this channel. And with the advent of modern cars, we've got electric vehicles, we've got hybrids that combine an electric motor with a conventional powertrain, and just the modern development of the internal combustion engine. It's time really for us to revisit this topic of eco-driving, just to help you to get more value from every time you fill the car up and help your car to go that little bit further. So ease, don't squeeze. It's very much related to what we do with our feet on the pedals, the accelerator or the throttle pedal and the brake pedal. The more heavy-footed we are on those pedals, the worse our fuel economy is going to be. So it's not the RPM of the engine that determines how much fuel the engine is using. It's the position of our foot on the accelerator pedal. So we can be in a high gear at low RPM, and our foot can be flat to the floor on the accelerator pedal to try and push the car forward. And that is going to use a lot more fuel than being in the correct gear. So it's going to be different for every car, but we need to find our car's sweet spot. That is a point within the RPM range that gives you the most efficient release of power and economy. It's the efficient zone that the engine has been designed in. Years ago, many manufacturers worked to around 50 miles an hour, which was where the MPG was measured. So in all the sales brochures, they aimed to get the 50 MPG figure as good as possible. And that's perpetuated really this idea that 50 miles per hour is the most economical speed to drive at. But the reality is it varies. Different engines, different situations, different driving styles and different driving conditions will have a bearing on that point in the RPM range, which is most efficient and most effective. So in some cars, pushing on at 70 miles an hour will use 20% more fuel than the same journey at 50 miles an hour. Obviously, the journey is going to take you longer, so you need to weigh up the cost of your time and the amount of fuel saving that you're going to make. But figures are going to vary dramatically depending on the engine that you've actually got. So let's try and break the habit that many drivers have of just using the highest gear they can and keeping the RPM as low as possible. I've found that in my car, keeping the RPM between 1600 and 2300 tends to give me the best fuel economy and a reasonable amount of acceleration. You really don't want to be that driver dribbling along in traffic, holding up everyone else, causing problems. We want to keep the flow of traffic moving. So this video is very much about sensible hypermiling, sensible eco-driving. And we're probably just doing this on our daily commute where we're not in any particular hurry. We're not enjoying the car. We're there with other traffic, but we want to keep our costs down. So we've got the car to enjoy at the weekend. And that's the point when a lot of drivers open up and really get to enjoy their engine. So someone said, I think it was in a comment on here, that they should pretend that 1/3 throttle is the full throttle. So that mentality really is getting you to use the throttle more gently, and there's certainly merits in that, but the actual claim of 1/3 will vary again from engine to engine, and also the gear you're in and what you're doing with the car. You're going uphill, downhill, and what else is going on around the car. There was a comment on here from Timp Biscuit that was quite interesting, so I just relate the sentiments of that comment. It was mentioning the BSFC, or the brake specific fuel consumption. So if you look at it in a graph, it varies according to throttle position and RPM. So in easy terms, it's really how fast your car goes and how much fuel it uses to go that fast. So for instance, if you're driving along and your throttle was at 25% and you increased it to 50%, you would be using more fuel, about 1.9 times more fuel. But at 50% throttle, you're accelerating twice as quickly. So really, you're getting to the speed twice as quickly. You're using 1.9 times as much fuel. So there is a saving there. If you went full throttle to 100%, you'd be accelerating twice as fast, but you'll be using about 2.5 times more fuel. so there wouldn't be a fuel saving there. So the general idea really is to get the maximum acceleration considering the engine's efficiency, and just to maximize that so you're getting up to the road speed as quickly as possible, but within the constraints of this efficiency that an engine provides. It's also conversely true at very, very low RPM, you're not getting that efficiency from the engine. So look into BSFC, look at dyno printouts for your car and get a feel for how your car responds to different throttle inputs and different power requirements. And that will really help you to map out where you should be in the gear selection if you've got a manual gearbox, and also how much throttle you should be using to achieve whatever set speed you're after. So the general rule of thumb, the Goldilocks zone for most engines seems to be around about 2000 to 2500 RPM. Again, it's going to vary. Turbo engines, diesel engines and rotary engines are going to have completely different figures to the standard naturally aspirated engine that many drivers have. So accelerating, changing the car's speed will use more fuel. So you certainly don't want to be accelerating to a faster speed than you need. If you accelerated, say, up to 25 miles an hour and then coasted to the next light and compared your fuel economy with a car that accelerated up to 30 miles an hour and coasted to the light, the car that only achieved 25 miles an hour would use less fuel. So it really is up to us as a driver to make sure the car is using the right gear. A lot of comments I've had indicate that the suggested gear change figures you get on the car's dashboard, and even some automatics, do not always choose the most appropriate gear. So let me know in the comments what your experience has been with the selections shown on the dashboard of which gear you should be in, and also how your automatic performs, and whether you keep it in eco mode or you move it into sport mode, and whether you've noticed much of a difference in fuel economy between those two settings. So again, with ease, don't squeeze, think about the brake pedal. Brake as gently as possible. Now, I said in a previous video, we shouldn't really be using our brakes, and I think that horrified a lot of drivers that just felt you had to use the brake in traffic. The reality is, if you anticipate and use engine braking and have sufficient distance between you and the car in front, you can in most situations avoid using your brake. And in fact, it's a game that people often play. I've had friends suggest this to me, of how much of your journey, your daily commute, can you do without touching the brake pedal. And what that does, it forces you to think ahead, to anticipate changes in the flow of traffic and to try and match your speed so you don't have to brake. Obviously the brake is there as a safety feature, but for the economical driver or the hypermiler, the brake is only there to stop the car in an emergency situation, and the car should be going at an appropriate speed at all times, with the driver anticipating the traffic flow and easing off in good time so the car's momentum slows up to allow for the traffic being stationary ahead. So a lot of modern cars now have Regen. What is Regen? Well, in a hybrid car, the motor that is used to drive the wheels, the electric motor, doubles up as a generator, a sort of alternator to put power back into the battery. So with Regen, the idea is that when you ease off the throttle and the car's under engine braking, or when you touch the brake lightly, the Regen system will cut in and recoup some of the kinetic energy of your car moving forward into battery power. Now, bear in mind that no system is 100% effective. You are not going to recoup exactly the amount of power that you lose in a battery. There are so many losses going on throughout the system. It's just not a reasonable expectation to have. So some drivers have actually found that the Regen mode costs fuel on certain types of journey, certain types of drive, but actually saves fuel in other situations. So many people have said that in traffic where you're using the brake intermittently, the Regen can actually save fuel. But on longer journeys where you're using hills and valleys and you're meeting much more gradual changes of speed, the Regen can actually cause the car to slow up more than you would want. So you're having to use throttle to pick up the speed that the Regen system has robbed you of, and it's not putting all of that energy back into the battery. So in those situations, the Regen can be costing you fuel. So that's also true of EVs. They often have a Regen mode, which some drivers switch off in order to get better economy. So it very much depends on your driving style and the situation you're in. If you're driving driving in traffic, you may find that the regen system is more beneficial in the long term. And in other situations, you may find switching it off gives you better fuel economy or better range overall. So also on EVs, there's a mode where you have a single pedal mode where the accelerator actually acts as the brake. So depending on where your foot is, it either accelerates the car or it brakes the car. And a lot of people have said that regen mode and single pedal mode cost you range. And I'd be very interested to hear your experiences of that. So a lot of drivers seeking to get the maximum range from their EV have turned off both of those systems, and they say they get better range out of it. But I guess that depends on your skill as a driver. And again, the situation you're in, your type of journey, the type of traveling that you do. So now we come to the pulse and glide method. So the idea is that you build up speed and then you allow the speed to drop down and then you build up speed again. So some drivers do that and they say that that is going to make the car more economical. I've got a friend who does it to the extreme and it makes me feel seasick. He goes up to 30 miles an hour, coasts down to 20, accelerates up to 30. So you've got a constant cycle of the speed increasing and dropping. Now, I found that in my car and most cars I've tried, you don't make an overall fuel saving. The cost of accelerating the car back up to speed is much greater than anything you've saved in that coasting period. And just maintaining a constant speed has usually generated better fuel economy overall over the length of that journey. But please let me know your experiences in that. But when we start talking about hills and valleys, that method kind of makes a little more sense. So a lot of drivers will allow the car to build up speed going down a hill, and as the car goes up the hill, they'll allow it to lose a little bit of speed. So when you're going uphill, you're obviously going to need more throttle and use more energy to maintain the set speed. So there's a little bit of a saving there if you're not pushing the car to a constant speed. So people have said that using cruise control in those situations where the car is maintaining a constant speed can actually prove to be less economical than an intelligent driver anticipating the road ahead and allowing these sensible changes in the speed of the car. But obviously bear in mind the cars around you. Don't be that annoying driver that slows everyone up going up a hill. We can do these things to extremes, or we can just take a subtle hint of the method and gain a few more MPG. So coasting in neutral, this is hotly debated as well. A lot of drivers will move the car into neutral and they'll say that that saves fuel. Now that's illegal in many areas and regions, so it's certainly not something I can recommend, especially if you live in those regions. But let's just think about what's going on. So if you were going downhill and the car was in gear, the car would not need any fuel to keep the engine rotating. You've actually got some engine braking going on. Now, this is going to vary depending on the severity of the hill or the slope you're traveling down. And in some cars, the engine braking is so severe, the car will slow up significantly. And especially so if you're in the wrong gear, if you're in a very low gear downhill, that can excessively cause engine braking to slow up the momentum of the car. So your aim is to keep the car actually moving. When you're in neutral, the car needs a little bit of fuel to keep the engine ticking over. So in most cases, you'll use more fuel in neutral than you will allowing the car to just ride and the engine braking control your movement down the hill. Now, the dangers come from the fact that you're not under full control of the car, and this is why it's illegal in most areas. So most of the weight is over the front of the car. So if you need to change direction, you would naturally just press the accelerator and balance the car. So in neutral, you don't have the option of doing that. You'd have to very quickly bang it into gear and select a gear. And in those situations, you're talking about emergency things, emergency changes of direction. You may not have time to react. So it's a more dangerous situation to be in. And also, you don't have the benefit of engine braking in neutral. So your car is picking up speed on a hill, and that requires you to use the brake. You're riding the brake. Now, when you ride the brake, you're putting a lot more heat into the brakes as the brake pads contact the brake rotors or brake discs, and that can actually lead to brake fade. You'll want the brakes to work at a later point in the journey, and they just won't because they've got too hot. So coasting is not something that I would recommend. So now we come to tailgating or slipstreaming, where you rely on the aerodynamic drag of the car in front or the vehicle in front to really cut through the air for you and leave you a low friction friction area to move your car through. So cyclists appreciate this. In competitions, they appreciate the reduction in drag when they follow each other in a single line. But the problem is, to get close enough to achieve a significant effect, you need to be within your stopping distance. But surely if you were behind a HGV, it's much heavier. It's going to take potentially twice as far to stop as you will in your car. So is it really as dangerous as possible? Well, it was pointed out to me that even a HGV or a lorry or a truck can suddenly stop if it hit a concrete barrier ahead, it hit the central reservation, if it hit an overpass column, if it just ploughed into traffic ahead. And if you're very, very close to the vehicle in front, you don't have very good visibility of the road ahead. So you don't get much of a heads up and a warning. And if it's stopping dead, you won't have enough time to brake, let alone often react, and you'll be straight into the back of it. So slipstreaming is quite dangerous. What does it actually do to your fuel economy? Well, when I've had nice expanses of road to play in and I've been able to get behind a HGV fairly closely, I've noticed my MPG increase from 45 MPG to 49 MPG. By moving out into the overtaking lane, the MPG has dropped back to 45 MPGs. So it's reasonably measurable. The drag that I'm saving is costing me about 4 MPG. So I'm looking at nearly 10% fuel saving in that instance. It's going to vary according to the speed that I'm doing, whether I'm going uphill or downhill. So there's a lot of other factors in there. So I certainly can't regard that as anything particularly scientific, but it's very dangerous to do. So I'm not going to recommend that we go out and start slipstreaming in our cars. So it's interesting, the choice of lane that we make, that can also have a bearing on fuel economy. So if we're on a 3-lane road, we call them motorways. Other countries call them autobahns, freeways, highways. Let me know in the comments what your country call it. It's interesting to see the divergence of names that we give to these multi-lane roads that connect our cities. But you'll often find the outside lane is used for overtaking, and that's often very variable in speed. The drivers in that tend to accelerate and slow up. There's a lot of people cutting into that lane, so that's going to add to the congestion in that lane. And the inside lanes are relatively slow. They tend to be occupied by the trucks, the lorries, the heavy goods vehicles. And in the main, these heavy goods vehicles and truck drivers know how to drive economically, and they maintain a constant speed. So often the traffic flows much more steadily in those slower inside lanes. So if you were considering fuel economy, it may make sense for you to drop into these slower, more steady lanes in order to save fuel, to avoid the constant changes of speed that you would get in those other lanes. And it certainly reduces your stress as a driver. If you've left in good time, you've got plenty of time to do your journey, you're not in a hurry. And that's another key to saving fuel, not being in a hurry. So servicing the car also has quite a bearing on the fuel economy that you get. So your choice of oil, running a high quality synthetic oil will in most cases reduce the fuel consumption in most engines, certainly in a lot of modern engines. And most manufacturers are now specifying these high grades of synthetic oil in order to maximize the overall fuel efficiency. Keep an eye on those tire pressures too. Flat tires can rob you of about 4 to 5 mpg. Again, that's going to vary from car to car and different speeds and journeys, but you've got a lot more flexing, there's a lot more heat going into the tires, you're losing some of that momentum. So just having the correct inflation pressure will maximize the fuel economy, really raising it closer to what the manufacturers intended. And some drivers even go beyond that. They increase the pressures. If the car has only got one occupant, they may increase it to the pressure that you need when the car is fully loaded. And that does seem to generate more fuel economy. There's less flexing going on in the tyre, but in most cases that reduces the grip of the tyre. Instead of having a flat tyre on the road, you've now got a slightly bulging tyre in the middle. So it's reducing your grip, it's reducing your handling. And if you go into those extremes, you may as well take the wheels off and put tiny little skinny tyres on, because that'll have the same effect. It'll reduce the drag, but you'll be making the car much more dangerous and challenging to drive. Everything in the engine needs to be working efficiently, so the injectors, running a good quality injector cleaner through, choosing good quality fuels with decent additive packs can make a big difference to how quickly the injectors start to degrade. And if you've got a modern direct injection engine, keep an eye on the carbon buildup on the intake, because if that intake is starting to build up with carbon, that is going to affect your overall fuel economy. So most of the servicing checks prevent you from being robbed of fuel economy. They don't really add fuel economy, but it can make a significant difference to many drivers. Your choice of fuel also matters. For many cars, particularly modern direct injection turbocharged engines, the higher grades, the higher octane or the higher cetane fuels will yield better fuel economy. Again, it's something you really have to try and measure just to see if that has a beneficial effect on your engine's fuel economy. Now, those fuels do cost more, so you've got to factor in the extra cost with the saving that you're making by having the better fuel economy. Also, avoid short journeys. Try and always drive on a warm engine, which doesn't mean pushing the car around and gently warming the engine up with a hairdryer before you begin your journey. Driving on a warm engine really means you minimize the amount of time the engine is cold, so you combine your short journeys into one day. You allow the engine to properly warm up before you shut it off, and that's going to help prolong the lifespan of the engine. The oil quality is not going to degrade. Those short journeys really do add to the problem of oil dilution. I've done a video explaining that issue, so if it's not something you're aware of, certainly become aware of the problems of oil dilution caused by short journeys. And if you're driving anything with a particulate filter, those short journeys are going to lead to carbon buildup and clogging. And again, that's a curse of the hypermiler, the person that constantly uses low RPM. You need to use the full range of the engine, but that really means using the engine appropriately as it was designed. So avoiding the extremes of high RPM and the extremes of constant low RPM or driving under load at low RPM, and just using an appropriate gear for your power requirements, thinking of the BSFC that we mentioned earlier at the outset of this video. So another aim of hypermilers and eco drivers is to keep the car moving. Moving a car from stationary requires a lot more energy than maintaining a constant speed or picking up speed from a car that is already moving. And it just requires anticipation. It's an important skill to develop as a driver. But if you anticipate correctly, you can avoid coming to a halt. And that's actually going to improve the traffic flow overall. If more drivers did that, we wouldn't have this constant stop-start on our highways, freeways or motorways. So some people accelerate up to the terminal velocity or the speed they want to travel at, and they get there as quickly as possible and then maintain that speed. And they say that gives better fuel economy overall. You're using the acceleration in a very, very short burst. Please let me know your experiences of that method. Do you find that picking up speed as quickly as possible has given you better fuel economy overall? For most though, it's just a matter of accelerating reasonably quickly up to the speed and using the correct gears. So not jumping from second to fifth, but allowing you to explore the power ranges between the gear ratios up to the speed that you need to travel at. Another tip that I've picked up over the years is the half a tank of fuel. Now, having half a tank of fuel means you're carrying less weight. Less weight in the car means the car is going to be more efficient. You're using less energy to move the car around. The downside, though, is that you need to make more frequent trips to the fuel station. So you need to go twice as much if you've only got half the fuel in the tank. And if you live in an area where that involves a journey, that can rob you of any saving you make by not lugging a full tank of fuel around. Now, think about the weight of the fuel. If your fuel tank is 60 or 70 litres, 60 or 70 litres of fuel is going to weigh quite a bit. It's like having another passenger or two in the car, depending on how skinny or how fat your friends are, of course. So that also brings us to mention being sensible about the purchasing of fuel. Driving 20 miles to save a penny is crazy. The distance you've driven is going to use far more fuel than you're ever going to save on the tank. But obviously, if the price difference is significant, there is a saving there. So think about what you're doing. What is the cost of getting that cheaper fuel? Does it outweigh the saving that you would have made? So with some cars, you're traveling at a constant speed. Just lifting off the accelerator can force the car to use less fuel. Just a brief lift off and going back on. If you've got an automatic, it may encourage the automatic to just change gear, to go from say fourth to fifth gear to cruise at a more economical range. Let me know if that helps in your car, if you've noticed you get better fuel economy after you've just released the accelerator and gone back on. It depends very much on the engine type you've got, what the ECU or the car's computer is actually doing. But in a lot of cases, you will get better fuel economy just after that than you would have done had you maintained constant throttle. So modern cars positively sip fuel. Many cars have got an eco mode, and the eco mode is generally designed to improve fuel economy, but it generally works by easing up the throttle inputs, which you as a driver would be doing anyway. And it's engaging the EGR, the exhaust gas recirculation, more on some cars. So that potentially is throwing more soot into the intake. So that can be causing further problems down the line. But even in sport mode or non-eco mode, you may find you get better fuel economy overall than you would do just relying on the eco mode, just by making better choices as a driver and being more skillful as an economical driver. But bear in mind that constant eco driving, keeping the RPM as low as possible, lugging the engine at low RPMs, being in inappropriate gears causes a tremendous amount of wear and tear on the car. And I've done a video just discussing some of the dangers that happen from constant low RPM driving. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do so, because we'd love you to stay tuned. If you can just boot that like button, that really does help us to get out there. And I've lined this video up for you that you should find really interesting. Thanks for watching. See you in this next video.